Drake's labored breathing was his only company as he hiked up the final flight of stairs, body protesting, blood leaking from his wounds. Rage was the only thing keeping him moving. He was tired of it. The death that surrounded him wherever he went. The constant suffering he'd seen and endured. The torture inflicted on those he loved. He couldn't let it happen anymore. He couldn't bear to see any more of those he loved die. Shoving the stairwell door open, he stumbled out into the hallway. Dark clouds filled the edges of his vision, like looking through a tunnel. Painstakingly putting one foot in front of the other, Drake hobbled towards the twisted and buckled blast doors. He'd fight them all off, no matter the consequences. This was his burden, not theirs. The hatred in his heart was cold as ice, driving him forward. "Hey!" he heard Kaz shout from behind him. Turning, he gave her a confused look as she jogged towards him, rifle in hand. There was an odd look on her face. "Kaz, I told you—" Whack! Lights popped in front of Drake's eyes as Kaz slammed the butt of her rifle into his nose and knocked him on his ass. Drake felt his nose break and groaned. The sudden, unexpected strike had caught him completely off guard. "You need to get your shit together! We are not your goddamn lackeys! We're a team! You handpicked us, gave us names, and now you're telling us to sit back and twiddle our thumbs while you go get yourself killed? Are you dumb or just fucking delusional, Drake?" Drake, for the first time in a long time, was reminded of his age as Kaz shouted at him. "Drake, you're 7 fucking, riddled with holes, and about to face a tank and who knows how many Geknosions. Even with your goddamn supernatural powers, do you really think you can win on your own?" Drake looked up at her before dropping his head. He quietly panted back, gripping his sword so hard the leather hand wrap creaked. "It's not your fight. I just dragged you into it." Kaz knelt down, lifting his chin so he could look her in the eyes. Then she slapped him, hard, before growling in his face. "You ignorant asshole! Do you think just because you started this fight, it's yours and yours alone to win?" Kaz paused, taking a deep breath as she sat down in front of him, face softening. "I get it. Trust me, I do. If I had 1% of that weird-ass power you got, I'd think the same. But for the love of life, kid, let us help. It's what we signed up for." The icy hatred in Drake's chest shattered, his breath hitching as the shards dug into his ribs. He found himself starting to cry. I can't lose you guys too." His body rocked with sobs. "I watched my parents die. I saw my village destroyed. If I had to watch you all die too..." He couldn't finish his sentence as he weakly hugged his knees to his chest, sobbing into them. He was overwhelmed and exhausted, terrified and weak. He was deluding himself if he thought he could win on his own. A soft, comforting palm pressed against his cheek, and he looked up. Kaz wore a soft expression, speaking gently. "Drake, we've all suffered. I was forced to bear children. Remen lost his family and friends to the geckos. Cassius's voice box was removed to force him to dance. And Destrier had the one person he loved ripped away from him." Drake sniffled, listening to Kaz's soft words, each one like a small stab in his heart. "If you don't want us to fight, Drake, you shouldn't have rescued us. You shouldn't have put guns in our hands and trained us to use them. But you did. Do you know what that tells me?" He shook his head weakly. Kaz gave him a soft, slightly disappointed smile. "It means some small part of you knew you couldn't do it alone from the start. I know you free everyone. I know you want to save everyone. But Drake, you can't. Even more so when you're doing it alone. Please, let us help you. We aren't afraid to die fighting. What scares us more than anything is the thought of going back into those cages. What scares us is living the life of a slave again. Please, Drake, if we're going to die, let us die at your side." Drake looked up into Kaz's stern, but caring face. He didn't want to lose them. He dreaded the very thought. But looking into Kaz's intense eyes, he realized something. He'd rather see them dead and free than alive and enslaved. One was bad, the other unforgivable. Taking a deep breath, Drake nodded slowly. "All right. If we're to die today," he mustered a grin he didn't feel. "We die free." Kaz smiled. Standing up, she offered Drake a hand. "We should have time. Come on. Let's go patch you up before the big fight." Drake took her hand, letting her haul him to his feet. Swinging an arm around her neck, he leaned against her for support as they made their way towards the medbay. Softly, Drake asked, "Kaz?" "Yeah?" "I know I was losing it, but you didn't have to break my nose," he muttered, gingerly touching the swollen flesh. "Yes, I did," she asserted. "Yeah, you did," he reluctantly agreed. Kaz laughed, a sound he'd never heard her make before. "You're a troublemaker. Of course I had to smack some sense into that thick skull of yours." The two shared a grim smile and continued on their way. The 5 troublemakers occupied the quiet armory, the now near-empty weapons rack a grim reminder of what they were fighting for. It had been less than an hour after the doors were blown in that they lost almost every single one of their fighters and fellow humans. Up until now, they'd been fighting a fattened and lazy planetary garrison. But with career mercenaries waiting outside, the fight had changed. It was still about freedom, but now, more than ever, it was about survival. Not just theirs, but the ones they swore to protect. Drake knotted the final bandage around his midsection, a few potent painkillers taking the sting away. The damned Geknosion helmet in front of him crackling with the back-and-forth dialogue of the mercenaries out front. So far, he'd gathered that they at least weren't going to try and push into the bunker again. While it bought them some time, it was still just a lull in the violence, one that weighed heavily on all their shoulders. Drake thumbed rounds into a magazine for his M40 carbine, hands shaking slightly. Whether from fear or the damage to his body, he couldn't tell. Truth be told, he didn't know what he was feeling, other than exhausted. The radio in the helmet crackled. It was General Mago's voice. "Ahem! I know you're listening, parasites. Perhaps not all, but at least the leader. What was their name? Ah, yes, Drake. Let me know you're listening, boy. There should be a button on the helmet's chin to activate the microphone. I'd like to talk." Drake stared blankly at the helmet, a dark trickle of fear running down his spine. Mago hadn't said it, but he could figure they were tracking the helmet's position. Looking over at Kaz for her input, he gestured at the helmet. She nodded, and Drake glanced over at where Remen and Destro were screwing the fuses into some RPG-70 warheads. They paused, passing a look between each other before nodding. Drake was about to look to Cassius, but the mute had appeared from nowhere at his side. Silently, Cassius flipped the helmet over and nodded. Drake nodded back. Mouth dry, he pressed the little indent on the chin before speaking. "This is Drake." He was almost shocked at how scared he sounded. No, how scared he was. The radio crackled to life. "Good! You've at least got enough brains to speak. Now, let me lay this out for you, Drake. I've got 500 men waiting for you outside those doors, not to mention the extra Gallic they rode in on. I'm, of course, speaking to you from my own, so there's 2 of them total. You do know what a Gallic is, right?" Drake was about to respond. That, of course, he knew what that armored death machine was. But a moment of inspiration made him realize playing dumb could be the smarter move. Pressing the indent again, he licked his lips before responding. "I don't. Why does that matter?" When the radio crackled to life again, It was accompanied by the Geknosian general's raucous laughter.
Oh, you parasites don't stand a chance! You see, other than enough armor to survive an orbital barrage at close range, Nars are equipped with the latest and greatest in rapid-fire railgun technology. Those obsolete HEP firearms you're still using aren't even going to leave a scratch, even if you got past the railguns. On top of that, there's around 5 automated plasma cannons that give 360-degree coverage. You got all that?
Sounds like a mean machine. What are you getting at?
No, you don't get it yet? Guess you weren't as smart as I thought. I'm telling you to surrender. You can't win. Here, I'll even sweeten the deal. If you surrender, I promise to personally ensure that the non-combatants amongst you are returned to their markets unharmed. You 5, however, will be executed for treason against the Geknosian order. I also promise to make them painless deaths, so you don't suffer. What do you say, Drake?
Disgust boiled up in Drake's stomach. The very idea of surrendering sickened him. What was worse was that for a moment he'd considered it. For a moment he thought that if giving his life would ensure his people's safety, he'd do it. But he wasn't fighting for their safety. He was fighting for their freedom. Drake didn't respond for a moment, glancing over at Destrier before asking. Odd question. Do Geknosions have an asshole? Destrier frowned. No, sir. They have a cloaca, I think it's called. It's kind of an all-in-one system. Drake nodded, then pressed the transmit button again. Look, Mago, you must be huffing the Monarch's special stash if you think we're going to surrender. You can shove your Galax and numbers up your cloaca. If we die fighting. There was silence over the radio. Then the helmet made a sizzling sound as smoke rose from it. Drake knew somehow that they'd triggered a self-destruct sequence for it. Sighing, he glanced over at the others, faces hardened by determination. Drake nodded, sliding the magazine he'd been loading into his carbine. 12 more strapped to a belt against his waist. Clearing his throat, he spoke his thoughts aloud. We could die out there. Kaz slid off the shelf she'd been sitting on, speaking for all of them. Better to die free than go back to slavery, Drake. Drake nodded, swallowing back the fear he felt for their lives. All right. Destrier and Kaz, I need you guys to climb the ventilation shafts near the front. The waste gas from the system is pumped out into the entryway. I need you guys up there covering me, Remen, and Cassius while we assault them head-on. Cassius, Remen, we're going to take those rampart shields Brown made for us and push out through the main doors. Drake gestured at the 5 rectangular metal shields that leaned against the shelf behind him. Using those as cover, we're going to rush their tanks as fast as we possibly can. If we can pierce their ranks, hopefully they'll be too concerned about friendly fire to use the Galax. After we've, hopefully, cleared out a majority of their foot soldiers. Destrier, it falls on you to use that RPG to disable those railgun turrets before they make us holier than their mother of conquest. Everyone understand? Cassius nodded and racked the bolt back on his slim SMG. Remen smiled, a few painkillers and a stiff drink making him forget about the wound in his stomach. Sounds like a plan. Destrier hauled the launcher and backpack of rockets onto his shoulder. I don't got any better ideas. Kaz gave Drake an encouraging smile and patted his shoulder. Try not to steal my kills, you brute. Drake nervously nodded and put on a brave smile he truly didn't feel before sliding his arm into the straps of his shield. Let's do it then.